So Medha, you want to give it a couple of more minutes?
Sure, sir, until everyone joins.
I can expect a few more people, I think.
Yes, sir.
So, with the permission of Dr. Victor, we will just wait for 2 minutes or more. Yeah.
Sure, sir.
No issues, sir. We can wait.
Medha, which part of Bangalore do you stay in?
Sir, I'm not from Bangalore. I'm from Vijaypura, sir.
Oh, so you are speaking to us from Vijaypura.
Yes, sir.
Brilliant. And what's going on there?
Nothing much, sir. It seems the place is much affected with mucormycosis right now.
Okay.
So there's a little chaos everywhere right now.
Okay. Okay. So be careful.
Yes, sir. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing very well. Busy a little bit with a lot of teaching. Also
Right.
with the executive MBA.
Right.
This semester I'm not teaching you guys so much.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, it's been pretty busy.
Yeah.
So Professor Rajan, you'll have to tell us when we can start. Sorry, Dr. Victor.
No issues, Captain. No issues.
Imtiaz, could you make Professor Rajan co-host, please, if you don't mind?
Yes, sir. Yes. Done, sir.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Imtiaz. Thank you, Imtiaz.
Yeah.
Sir, I think we can start. Sir.
We'll start. Okay.
120
Medha,
students. I think it's a good participants. Yeah, Media, please go ahead. Yeah.
please go ahead. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, everyone. I'm Medha Patki, second semester student of MBA program at Dayanand Sagar University. It is an honor and privilege to have Dr. Victor with us today, who gladly accepted our invitation to carry out the session. Welcome, sir. I would also extend a warm welcome to our Dean, Professor Captain Nagaraj Subbarao, sir, along with our professors of MBA and Executive MBA, and all the participants present in this virtual session, who are definitely going to have a wonderful and informative session. I would now take this opportunity to introduce our distinguished speaker to the audience. Professor Dr. George Yesuveda Victor is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Dredging Corporation of India Limited and is the Secretary General of Eastern Dredging Association, India. He holds a doctorate degree, is a chartered engineer, chartered physicist, certified dredge master and marino, qualified in finance management, port development and management, containerization and logistics management, fellow in arbitration, licensed international arbitrator, mediator, emergency arbitrator, and a qualified admiralty and contracts lawyer. He is the commissioned officer. Chief Suit Executive is a charismatic leader in marine, ports, and dredging sector with unwavering commitment to success and focus on development in preserving environment. Dr. Victor is recipient of awards, amongst others, Exemplary Achievement Award, Maritime Award, and contribution to Indian industry. He was awarded Young Scientist Award for his contribution to research in marine engineering and environment. He serves as chairman and member of technical committees constituted nationally and internationally, empaneled with WB, ADB, ICA, FICCI, EMAC, IDRC, PDRC, IPA, IOP, and SIA. He has been appointed by the Government of India as a member of 5-member expert committee on skill development program of Sagarmala. Accomplished professional with blend of industrial and legal experience, and is an international arbitrator and mediator for commercial contracts. He serves as the chairman and board members of Bangladesh India Mediators Forum. He also serves as member scientific group in World Dredging Association and member of the scientific committee of IOP UK on climate change and environment. He is an international acclaimed trainer, assessor, and speaker. So we are very much delighted to have you today, and I welcome you to this session.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Before we start the session, I would like to ask Ganesh to let everyone know the ground rules of this session. So over to you, Ganesh.
Yeah. So good evening, Dr. Victor, Dean Sir, teachers, and my dear friends. I welcome all of you for today's webinar. Sir, I am Ganesh Patil, student of MBA at Dayanand Sagar University, and I thank DSS Student Committee for giving me the opportunity to address the gathering. So now I will like everyone to follow the etiquettes of the Zoom meeting. So firstly, please make sure your camera is off and be on mute. Secondly, I'm really sure you would be keen on asking questions. So please write your questions in a chat box below. Sir would be taking a few relevant and common ones in the last 15 minutes of the session. So lastly, I think I can assure you that this is going to be a very enlightening and interesting session. With the hope of the rules are clear, sir, I think we are good to start with the session. I think the rules are clear, sir. I think we are good to start. Victor, sir.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I want to thank Captain Professor Nagaraj Subbarao for inviting me to talk with you today and also to share my views on the maritime industry and a future perspective of how the maritime industry is going to behave in the next decade. I also thank the student organizers who contacted me and also who had patience to wait for my reply. I thank each and every one of Dayanand Sagar University for having invited me to give my thoughts and to give my perspective of what I understand by the term maritime industry or the maritime trade on a future perspective. So let me start with the very basics of what maritime industry is. Maritime industry is a preferred mode of transportation, and it's a preferred mode of transportation for the reason it's economically viable mode of transportation where it's more environmental friendly. You can transport bulk commodity or the bulk material. It's easy to handle, easy to storage, and it's preferred for inter and intra-continents transportation. So when you compare maritime industry or the maritime transportation with road or railways, there are certain advantages and there are certain disadvantages, but mostly for the maritime transportation, there are big advantages because it's viable, it's economical, it's environmental friendly, and it's easy to handle. Having said that, what are the verticals of maritime industry? The maritime industry, when we talk about per se, should have a port infrastructure, a port where you have few berths, where you have a storage yard, where you have other infrastructure, the mechanical infrastructure, the civil infrastructure. Then you should have the shipping industry, the industry which can carry cargo from one port to the other port, or from one region to the other region. And the shipping industry, the most important thing, or the most important economic viability, is to have a cargo tie-up. And then the port should give a safe navigation channel, because the ships travel across oceans, travel across seas, or from point A to point B, where one will find the ship are on deeper waters. But when it comes close to the shore, there might not be a deeper water, there might be a very shallow waters. Henceforth, the port industry should facilitate a safe navigation channel, so that the ship can enter the port, discharge the cargo, load the cargo, and go back to the next port. And to create a safe navigational channel, you need to have a dredging method or a desilting method based upon the requirement of your port. Your port might require a pre-monsoon or a post-monsoon dredging, or your port might require continuous dredging in case if it's in a river confluence mouth, or if it's an estuary. So depending upon different parameters, the dredging takes place in the port to create a safe navigation channel. And the most important thing of a maritime industry is the last mile connectivity. If you look 2-3 decades earlier, the last mile connectivity was not a concept in the maritime industry or the maritime sector. The cargo was transported from one port to the other port, or from one region to the other region, and the cargo shifting from the port to the last mile connectivity was not the prerogative, or was not within the control of the port, or was not a part of the work of the shipping industry. But now, because of the economic scale and because of the competition, the new concept or the new business model is a last mile connectivity, where the shipping industry or the port assure that the cargo will be moved till the point where it has to be moved. So these are all the few verticals. However, we are not going to discuss on all these verticals. We will be only concentrating on what is a maritime industry, and how is the maritime industry going to be, or what is the trend of the maritime industry in the next 10 years. So I want to start with you like maritime world. And what is a maritime world? The emerging nations, the developing nations, or developed nations, I should put it in that way, forms a maritime world. The maritime world in 2020, and this talk will revolve around a decade ahead, the trend of how the trend is going to be, and what all the different perspectives, and what the industry per se looks like, and what are the economic indicators, and what are the economic trends for the next decade. So the maritime world in 2020 will be almost unrecognizable from what was in the past, owing to the rise of emerging countries like Africa, India, and China. The new consumer classes and resources may increase the demand and supply. Earlier, the maritime industries were west-based, and then it slowly moved into the Far East region, and then to the Asian region. And now, more specifically, the maritime industry development is taking place in the African countries. Having said that, India and China still plays a very pivotal role, or India and China still plays a very, very vital role in between the emerging countries, between the developed countries, and between the developing countries, so as to move the cargo. So therefore, in 2020, the trend is going to be something different, which we might not have seen in the earlier decade or few decades before. With COVID, or with the second wave of COVID and the third wave of COVID is anticipated, will it impact the shipping industry, or will it impact the maritime industry, is a question mark as of now. And how does the maritime industry change? Does it change only with some parameters, or does it change with so many other factors? Whenever we talk about the maritime industry, or whenever we talk about the maritime sector is a trade which is dependent upon certain parameters. One is the demographic parameter, the technology parameter, the sustainable drivers. So these are the parameters which affect the daily business and also which gives you the trend of how things will change in the coming years or how the things will change in the coming decades. Therefore, the Maritime Authority, the policymakers or the organization, or we need to develop the pool of experts, the managers, the technocrats, the engineers, and the navigational officers to encounter or to be prepared for such changes which are most likely to occur very soon. And this outcome should be anticipated before by predicting how the demographics is going to change, how the technology is going to evolve, and what are the sustainable parameters or what are the sustainable drivers that one should look at or one should concentrate to predict how the trend is going to be in the maritime sector or in the maritime industry or the maritime trade. And it is also expected that trade routes, the competitive position of stakeholders, the ecosystem and the cargo distribution is not going to be the same. It's going to be different from today. Because if you look at the basic demography of Africa, you will find there are a lot of minerals. If you look for Middle East, you will find rather than minerals, you find oil is there. If you look India, then it's a combination of minerals, the combination of minerals, the combination of rice and other exports, including iron ore and steel. So the composition of the cargo are going to be different at different regions in the days to come. And therefore, will COVID play a vital part, or will COVID play as an enhancer, or will COVID play as a deterrent? It's too early and too premature for us to really understand now, and only time will evolve and time will be able to tell us whether it's going to be deterrent or it's going to be an enhancer of the business. Having said that, the port and the maritime sector has been classified as an essential services. So being classified as essential services, across the globe, all the nations and all the countries are taking extra precautions of the seafarers and the port industry staff or the port industry employees, so that the chain is not going to break and the maritime trade will continue. And it also becomes more important and pertinent for the stakeholders to prepare appropriate policies, the strategies, and the appropriate plan, so that they can be prepared for the change in the trend and the change in the demographic, technology, or the sustainability drivers of maritime industry. And I'm just giving you a snapshot of how this seaborne trade looks like. If you can see the globe and see all these white lines crisscrossing, that's how the maritime trade looks like today. That's how the ships transit from one region to the other region, or from one continent to the other continent, or from one port to the other port, carrying bulk of the cargo on an environmental friendly manner. So what are the trends that we use in the maritime industry in 2030? So these are all the indicators. The indicators are the demographic drivers, the technology drivers, and sustainability drivers. The demographic drivers will be the strategy, the protectionism, and tilt in Asia. That's what I said. The Asian market will be a sort of a game changer, and increased use of technology. And what are the technology drivers? Again, you have to protect your cargo, you have to protect your business. Then again, the tilt is going to make all the changes, the increased use of technology, and which is, you are going to concentrate on a very niche market, the new production change, the increased focus, sustainability. And what are sustainable drivers? The sustainable drivers are the niche market, the new productions, the increased focus, sustainability, and the new trade routes. Many new trade routes are likely to open. So therefore, if you look at the 8 indicators, what has been listed here, 1 to 5 will be your strategic infrastructure investments, what will be required. B will be distinguishing strategy, and C will be the increased collaboration. So this is how a model of the maritime industry in 2020 has to effectively work in case if they have to be successful having the maritime trade across the globe. So you have the strategic infrastructure investments, you have the distinguishing strategy, and you have got the increased collaboration. When I started with, I mentioned there are certain maritime verticals, which is a port infrastructure, the shipping industry per se, and the safe navigation channel where dredging is required. And then you have to have your cargo tie-up, which has to be, the transportation has to be environmental friendly. So that is your strategic infrastructure investments, where you have to invest in your port infrastructure, where you have to invest in developing your greenfield and brownfield ports, where you have to invest in developing your storage areas, where you have to increase in developing your supply chain management, the last mile connectivity, your cold storage in case if you're using commodities that should not perish. So therefore, your infrastructure investments are required, which will have a major contribution in determining your trade. And what are the other strategies? The other distinguishing strategies are probably what the strategies we had in the past will not work in the future as well. So that's the reason we have to go to the niche markets to explore possibilities of having those markets interface with the last mile connectivity and interfacing with your inland transportation, your multimodal transportation consisting of inland transportation, your coastal shipping, and your hub ports. Thereby, the cost and the economics will be reduced. Once the cost and economics are reduced, where the bulk of the material is transported in an environmental friendly manner, the maritime trade or the maritime industry will be successful, the model will be successful, and the economic indicators will also be on the linear increase. And not only that, in C, you have to have an increased collaboration. What is the increased collaboration? You have to have collaboration with the port industry, you have to have the collaboration with the shipping industry, you have to have a collaboration with the dredging industry and have an interface between the three, so that the multimodal transportation is also introduced here, where your last mile connectivity is achieved. And what are the demographic parameters for a maritime trade? The demography is a strong indicator for demand, or it's a strong indication for demand. And this demand, due to the increase in population, will increase the demand and convert that into a supply. Where there are no supply, or where the commodities are not easily available, then the supply increases. When the supply increases, the demand increases. When the demand increases, you might have to import or you might have to export, vice versa, depending upon your yield. So when the supply increases, the supply quantum is not going to be a very small level. It's going to be a bulk commodity or the bulk quantities. And this bulk quantities, you need to have a proper supply chain management, which calls for a cheaper option. And the cheaper option should also be environmental friendly, because the maritime trade or the maritime industry is governed under several policies, and also which is governed under several rules and regulations under IMO, which is an international maritime organization. We have SOLAS, we have MARPOL, and we have so many other procedures to be, conventions to be followed, and this conventions calls for an environmental friendly transportation of material. So therefore, the demographic maritime trade is a clear indicator, or which will give you the first indication whether there's a demand is there or whether supplies are required, and if demand and supplies are required, how much it's required, and what is the cheaper option for transportation, whether a multimodal transportation is required or whether maritime trade from one country to the other country or one continent to the other continent is required. And this is how the demographic changes or the population growth, which I have mapped between 1950 and 2050. The source are taken from the World Bank based on UN data of 2015 and 2018 partially, to map how the forecast is. So from 2020 to 2050, if you can look at, it's going to be a quantum jump of nearly 0.6%. Or you can say it will be 6%, not 0.6. I'm sorry, it's going to be 6% increase. And also, if you look at the population growth, which has been forecasted, it was a linear growth in the earlier years, but after 2010, you will find that the forecast is falling down, but still the population increase is going to be there. And if you go by the World Bank data, they very clearly indicate by 2030, there will be sufficient population on the face of the earth that the water table might deplete. And 2050, because of the population explosion or the population growth, the terminology they have used, that water table is going to be totally depleted. If the water table is going to be totally depleted, the World Bank predicts to have the World War III. So that's going to be the scenario of a population explosion, the population increase, which is the first indicator for the shipping trade or the shipping industry to understand the demand, to understand the supply, and be an early organization or be an early authority to devise policies, to write down the procedures, and to tie up your cargo for shipping movements or for the cargo movements. And this is how the demographic population are going to shift. It's now going to shift towards India, China, Australia, part of Australia, US, whereas Africa is going to increase at a very alarming rate of greater than 40%, the United Africa. So these are all the places. That is why when we started initially, I said that the shift was from the Western countries to the Middle East, Asia, and now to the African countries. And if you look at this global scenario of the expected population growth till 2050, you will really appreciate that the Western countries have got a very thin increase of population, whereas if you come to the African countries and to the Indian subcontinent, you will find there's a quantum jump in the expected population growth. So that's the reason where the maritime industry is also shifting from one continent to the other continent. It's not because certain countries are developing and certain countries are underdeveloped or certain countries have developed. It's only because the first indicator for any maritime trade or the maritime industry is the demographic population. Where the population increases, there will be a supply and demand. And that's the reason now we say the next shift is going to be Africa and Indian subcontinent. And this demographic population vector, if you can see in 2030, which will give you a very clear indication, the Africa, the Indian subcontinent are going to substantially increase. And this is how the regional contribution is. So India, China, and US and a part of Africa is going to provide a bigger chunk of contribution for maritime trade, and also they are going to transport commodities between one country to the other country or to the countries where the shift has taken. And what are the different commodities, what is required? One is the oil and coal. And if you look at this, the comparison, China consumes the largest, China comes first when in terms of consumption of oil, then India is third. And if you look at India, which is about 1/3, one third of what China consumes, or about half of what USA consumes. And whereas coal, India is number 2, and in terms of steel and other industries, India ranks number 3. So if you look at this will give you another indicator of why China, USA, and Africa are the preferred countries for the shift of maritime trade or the maritime industry, because of the consumption is higher. When the consumption is higher, And when they cannot produce sufficient or they cannot be self-reliant, then they have to import certain commodities. And when they import certain commodities, they depend on maritime industry, or they depend on waterborne transportation. And this waterborne transportation increases the maritime trade of a particular country. So what is the demand and supply? The demand and supply is when a country is not self-reliant, or when the country produces more than what it is required for. So when there is a surplus, or when there is a deficit, when there is a surplus, they export it. When there is a deficit, they always import commodities. So we saw what is the demographic explosion of population. The explosion of the population will increase the demand and supply. When the supply demands, it will be a bulk, or it will be a surplus, or it will be a acute deficient where a bulk material will be required, and this bulk material will be transported by waterborne because of a cheaper option and environmental friendly. And this is the demographic. Another indicator is urbanization, because even in India, if you look at the urbanization, there are quantum jump in urbanization from the rural areas, and also this urbanization is concentrating on pockets along a sea coast. If you look, if you consider 10 years ago or 20 years ago, there were not much of pockets along the sea coast which were congested, and all the ports were easily moving their cargo. But today, most of the ports are going for a satellite port on a landlord model, because they are unable to move the cargo from the congested port city or the port town. So this urbanization is going to be an indicator or a parameter to consider the quantum of the maritime trade or the quantum of the maritime industry, how it's going to increase. So when the population increases, the population will always increase where they will move or will try to get into pockets where they get all sort of facilities, where the infrastructure is developed, where they get medical facilities, where they get all the other facilities, and hence they will be moving into pockets where development is taking place or development has taken place. And therefore, the contribution of the world GDP, if you look at EU and the rest, is going to be the chunk of about 50%, and China will remain at 9, 11 and 19%. India will be about 3 or 4% till 2024. Now actually it's 4%, and Japan will be again 9%, 9, 6 and 6, whereas US will be 23%. So it's more or less the percentages are matching, but for China, which is going to have double their share in 2020 or 2024 when compared with 2010. Whereas in the India share of world GDP has decreased from 9 to 6% for various other reasons. And US and the rest of the nations are almost the same, or you can say that they have reached a saturated limit. Thereby, the world GDP is going to be in this trend. So, having seen what the demographic trend is, and how do we go for the technology, which is a maritime trade, and when there is a demand and supply increases, there could be transportation of bulk material from one country to the other country or one region to the other region, but it has to be closely monitored. If it is a perishable item, whether it's going to really perish, or if it's not a perishable item, it can be stored, where it can be stored, and what are the storage facilities available, and how quickly and how effectively the trade takes place. And all this depends on your cost and on your economics. If there is a poor planning, then your cost is going to have a quantum jump, and because it has a quantum jump, the shipping industries are going to fail. Once the shipping industries are going to fail, the ports will not have their trade, and therefore they will also have a big loss. And that's because of the monitoring was not effective. For that reason, many of the shipping companies have sunk, or many of the shipping companies are in NCLT because the monitoring was not proper. So how do we monitor? And we are in the era of electronic world, and monitoring is based on technology where you can have your laptop at your location and you can monitor the cargo that's moved in US, or the cargo that's moved in Africa, the cargo that's moved in any part of the world. So that's the technology. So monitoring shall be based on technology, and technology shall be based on innovation. You can have any innovations, and the latest being than cloud technology. So you can have the cloud technology for more innovative methods, and the innovation should result with a last mile connectivity where your cargo is picked up at the doorstep and it's delivered at the doorstep. And that's going to be more important. And that's what is the concept of Sagarmala project. And the Sagarmala project in India, which has been developed, has a simple motto of creating a hub ports, creating a coastal shipping, dedicated coastal shipping, creating inland waterways to connect hitherland movement of cargo, thereby the last minute connectivity that's pick your cargo from your doorstep and deliver to the doorstep will happen. And that's why people are quite interested in developing Sagarmala project, where a cargo, a finished cargo, or very a niche market in a hitherland, they will be able to transport this cargo to the hub port, and from the hub port it can be transported to any part of the world at much cheaper cost and in an environmental friendly manner, where the carbon footprints will be very less. And therefore we will have three technology innovations. One is the sea side, then we will have on the shipping, and then we will have at the shore side. And what is the seaside technology innovation? You have got the virtual reality, where you can understand how the cargo is being moved from one point to the other point, or how the cargo is stored. Then the commodity data analysis, you can do all the data analysis. You can acquire the data, you can do the analysis, and you can understand the demand supply of the commodity, or the demand supply of the commodity at one region. Thereby you will be able to identify the commodities and move it in a much faster manner. And the supply analysis, real-time digital source management, intelligent risk and compliances. The risk management can always be analyzed. The risk management in your demand and supply. If there is a huge demand and there's shortage of supply, if you can't supply at a given at any agreed point of time, probably there will be big damages. Or if there is if there is no demand and your supply is much higher, and if there are no new buyers, then again there will be damages and there will be a loss on the perishable items. The intelligence asset development, where you can develop your asset management. You don't need to have a big battalion of engineers or the big battalion of technicians. You can have remotely fixed real-time camera, which can give you all the analysis, which can give you the analysis of your engines, which can give you analysis of your fuel consumption, which can give you analysis of your fuel injectors, and also which can give you analysis of your flow diagrams. Thereby you will have much more preventive maintenance, and you will have much more accurate maintenance to be carried out on your assets. The big data analysis, earlier we did not have facility to analyze big data, a large volume of data, but now it can be done in a much easier way. That's how where the innovation comes. The autonomous transportation, the supply chain management and the vendor optimization, the drones, ROVs. In case if you have to have a quick underwater survey, you can always have a remotely controlled ROV. You don't need to have a diver physically going down and taking photographs. You can have a remote controlled vehicles. Then you have got a then all this will give you a very good indication of how the cost cutting, or where are what all the areas your cost can be cut, or where all the areas you need to invest money, so that the whole process goes on. So that's where the innovation on the seaside is. On the seaside, there are a lot of innovations. Your fuel, earlier you were using HFHST. From HFHST, now you have started using gas oil, then the heavy oil, then the LDO. Now we are using very low sulfur fuel oil, and it will be very soon we will be using clean fuel and biofuel, and also we might go to use for other fuels which are naturally naturally available. So those are the innovations on the shipping side. On the sea side, and the innovations on the port side is where it has got in approach services, loading, unloading, your storage, and your industrial processing. So approach services, the ship comes into your port, and then it has to have all the formalities completed, including your customs clearance, including your cargo discharging, your cargo loading, your cargo unloading, and the cargo storage yards, and your collaboration with many other subcontractors or your collaboration with many other vendors. So that's your approach and your loading and unloading. When you do the loading and unloading, it has to be accurate, where you have to have innovative methods, where you have to use the technology, where all these materials were stored as should be tagged, and this tagging is once it's done, once the cargo is tagged, then sitting in your office you will be able to monitor how the cargo is moved, and when it is moved, and where it is moved, and on which truck it's moved, and when it was cleared by the customs, and when the customs has inspected, and all this information can be collated at sitting in one end of your office. So that's more important when you do the unloading and loading. Then the storage, which I had discussed about, which is tagging of all your cargo and monitoring all its movement. And the industrial processing is when you have a perishable items or a non-perishable items that has to be stored, which has to be taken into consideration, where the technological innovations play a very vital role, which was not otherwise available few decades ago or few years ago. And technological innovation on the land side is intermodal transportation, the dry port and the hitherland transportation, which I discussed about this in the earlier slides. And I gave an example of Sagarmala project, which is interfacing the multimodal transportation to the hitherland transportation, where the last mile connectivity is met, the cargo is picked up at the doorstep and delivered at the doorstep. And the intermodal transportation is an interface of different transportation methods, probably at some segments or some legs where you find the rail transportation will be much cheaper than than transporting by waterborne transportation, or probably you may not have a inland waterway transportation where you have to basically depend on the rail or the road mode of transportation. So therefore, the intermodal transportation becomes more important for the last mile connectivity. And the dry port concept is a new concept. And in India, we don't have a big exposure to the dry port, but in the Maritime Vision 2030, there is a concept of dry port which will be coming up, which will be placed in hitherland. It will be something like ICDs or intercontainer depots, or which will be in the landlocked states. You will have a dry port, and this dry port will be governed by all the procedures, including the customs. And once the custom bound area, or once it's sealed, this dry port cargo will be transported directly to the hub ports, or through the multimodal transportation, it reaches the hub port for further transportation. So this innovations will lead us into a cheaper mode of economics, or the cheaper cost, thereby the movement of cargo per kilometer will be much reduced by using a technology vis-a-vis against not using the technology. And the land side, the hitherland transportation is like the smart cities. Then You've got an outsourcing, you have to interface with so many subcontractors and contractors and sub vendors for hinterland transportation for the last mile connectivity. To put everything into the perspective, we have the last mile connectivity. So you have the sea side, you have the port side, and you have the landline side. And the sea side is the transportation mode and the maritime transport or the maritime trade, the volume that's transported from point A to point B, or from a continent to continent, or from a region to region. That will be basically that will be broadly dependent on a shipping liner or a shipping industry per se. And then you have got the port interface, where it's the ship approaches the port. Then you have got a vertical of creating a port infrastructure, providing a safe navigation, providing safe berthing facilities, and for excavation or for loading, unloading, and then storage facilities, and evacuation of your cargo. And it should be interfaced with the land side for the last mile connectivity for delivery of the cargo at the doorstep. So you have got intermodal transportations consisting of railway, road, and inland waterways transportation. Thereby, you can have a concept of the dry port in case if it's a landlocked state or a landlocked region where you are not accessible to sea, or where you're not accessible to any, you don't own any of the ports. You can always have a dry port concept to have this interface connected with. And once you have the dry port, or even in the absence of a dry port, using the multimodal transportation, the last mile connectivity can be achieved by transporting the cargo to the hinterland. So this is how the technology has evolved in the last few decades. Thereby, the cargo which is tagged at one part of the world reaches the other part of the world, and both the persons who has transported the cargo from one part of the world to the person who had received the other part of the world will be able to monitor the tag of the cargo, will be able to assess, will be able to understand, will be able to know when, how, and where this cargo are going to be delivered, and how quickly it is going to be delivered, or how effectively it's going to be delivered. And that's the innovation has taken place with our technology. And I wanted to give you a brief of about how the maritime trade has increased. If you look at this pictures, which is the total fleet increase in tonnage in million gross ton. If you look at bulk cargo on the first, where I'm putting my pointer, the bulk cargo, it has increased it has increased more than 4 times. You look at 2000 to 200 to 700, it has increased, which is from 2010 to 2030, which was taken as competing nations, status quo and global commons, where there will be a big increase. Whereas in the container ship, we also find there is an increase, but not to the level of a bulk carrier. So the bulk is going to be increased on a higher level. The tankers will have a moderate increase, and the LNG will have much moderate increase of tonnage. And to see specifically the tankers, the Handymax, the Suezmax, Aframax, and VLCCs, the Handymax will have a maximum tonnage increase of about 2 times, and the Aframax will have about 1.6, 1.7 times. The Suezmax will have about 1.2 times, and the VLCCs are going to have the maximum of about two times than what it is in 2010 or in 2020. And the bulk carrier fleets, you have got Handymax, the small capes, the Panamax, and the large cape. The Handymax, it will be about 0.4 to 0.5 times increase from 2020 to 2030, and Panamax will be increase of about 0.8 to 0.1, whereas the small capes will have a quantum jump of about 3 times, and the large capes will have a quantum jump about 2 times. The container fleet, the ships which are lesser than 2,900 TEUs or greater than 7,600 or lesser than 7,600 TEUs, which we normally use it. The ships of equal to 7,600 TEUs will have a very quantum jump of 6 to 7 times than of 2020, between 2020 and 2030, whereas the ships of lesser than 2,900 will have a lesser percentage of increase, and the ships of lesser than 7,600 will have a moderate increase. And the shipbuilding market across the world, which have taken few countries, China is the biggest now, South Korea followed by Japan and the emerging nations. And China, if you look at the trend is on the increase. They are building many ships. South Korea again, many shipbuilders, many shipping industries are building the ships in China. For example, if it's a big tankers or the big cargo ships or the passenger ships are all built in China nowadays. And the as for the dredging industry is concerned, the big dredgers are also being built in China, whereas the engines and the other parts are flown from the Western countries. Similarly, with South Korea, Japan, and the emerging countries also have a substantial increase in the years to come. And that's what we saw in the fleet sizes. Because of the supply and demand, because of the paradigm shift from the Asian countries partially to Africa, because of the developing nations of China, India, and Africa, the ship sizes are also going to increase because of the demand, the high demand, or because of the surplus of or surplus of producers that has to be transported to another region, and because of the scale of economics. One has to have a cost effectiveness, a cost benefit when they transport huge amount of cargo from one point to the other point, and thereby it is very coherent with all the earlier slides that I had shown you, that the shipbuilding industry per se is increasing. They are building giant ships. When they are building giant ships, their drafts will increase. When the drafts increases, the approach to the port infrastructure, the safe navigation channel have to also increase, and thereby the dredging volume increases, the dredging scope increases, and the port infrastructure, the civil infrastructure, and the mechanical infrastructure also increases. And what is the other interesting areas where the maritime trade is increasing? It's not only the maritime trade of a conventional shipping industry is increasing, or the shipping trade is increasing. Between 2010 and 2030, the oil and gas platforms or the production units have increased from 270 to 620 between 2020, and anticipated to increase to 620 in 2030. So thereby, we will find that the maritime trade is not only on the conventional ships or the conventional cargo ships that's getting increased, and it also get increased in gas production or oil production platforms from 270 to 620. So 270 to 620, they will find a quantum jump in the number of tankers and the VLCCs one might require for transporting this crude oil from one part of the world to the other part of the world, or from one part of the world to the refineries. So thereby, there will be a quantum jump of the number of ships and the trade of oil and gas from one country to the other country in 2030, because most of the countries will be depending on clean oil and clean gas. And for that reason, there will be a quantum jump in 2030. And not only oil and gas, the wind turbines. I'm not talking about the wind turbines that are installed onshore, the wind turbines which are installed offshore, which are about 25, 40, 50, 60 kilometers away, or about 100 kilometers away. So when we are talking about the wind turbines, which are installed offshore, it's going to increase multifold by 2030, because the IMO and the United Nations are vouching for a clean environment to reduce the carbon footprint and to reduce the carbon content. So when you have to reduce the carbon content, you have to go for clean energy. That's a blue energy or the green energy. And these are the green energy. That's turbines. So the blue energy, again, you will have the wave energies. So this wind energies will increase to 65,000 wind farms, which will be able to produce 226,000 megawatts by 2030. That will be much more sufficient. So we can stop burning coal for our thermal plants to avoid environmental deterioration, or to reduce our carbon footprint. And the wave energy, the blue energy, which I said, which is going to about 22,000 by 2030. You can see the more areas which are which will have more effective, or in Africa, and in America, the Australia, and a part of Middle East and India. So these are all the areas, and including UK. So these are all the areas where the wave energies will also play a pivotal role in increasing the maritime trade between one nation to the other nation, because wave energy, the energy that can be sustained as a very clean energy, the construction of an offshore industry is going to increase the economics, is going to increase the production levels. Once we go for the increased production levels, the capital cost for installing this is going to increase. And once the capital cost is going to increase, then you need maritime, you need the ships, you need the barges, you need other floating barges or floating equipments for installing this, and thereby the maritime trade will have a quantum jump, quantum increase. And how the future port industry looks like, in my perspective, the growing complexity of the port operations leads to a diversification and intensification of land use. That's what I said. Today we have ports, not only in India, across the globe, which is basically a locked port town or a locked port city, which is more congested, and the movement of the cargo within from the port to the hinterland takes much longer. So therefore, most of the port operators are now moving out for a satellite port, or moving out to a location where it is totally owned by the port, where they will have the multimodal transportation. Thereby the cargo will be moved in a much faster and a quicker time, for which the new synergies between the port and the city are required. That's what I said. We need to have a satellite port, and new satellite port are all mushrooming, or all getting constructed all over the world, not only in India. And rapid urbanization shall also lead to congestion of port city and town, causing delay in cargo clearance. That's one of the indicator, the urban indicator, which cannot be avoided, which cannot be restricted. So therefore, the only option left for the ports are to move out to a satellite port and to create a multimodal transportation where the cargo can be moved quickly and easily. And therefore, the shipping trade will also flourish by unloading, loading, and movement of cargoes much quickly, rather than storing it for many days in the storage yard. And most of the port cities, the port towns lack the storage yard, because the storage yard, there's no storage yard, or the storage yard are occupied. The turnaround time of the ships are all much higher, and that leads to much demurrages and losses for the shipping industry and for the ports. So the outlook of the port industry or the maritime trade by 2030 or the future perspective appears to be bright, but we need to look at the demographic indicators, we need to look at the technological indicators, and we need to look at the synergies, and we need to look at the strategic drivers. So therefore, as to conclude, the maritime industry shall grow in the next decade against all odds, and the COVID second wave or third wave may not have a bigger impact because IMO has already intimated or informed that the shipping industry and the port industry falls under essential industry. Thereby, the second wave or the third wave may have an impact, but may not have a bigger impact. Therefore, the shipping trade or the shipping industry or the maritime industry will not have a negative impact. The ports, both greenfield and brownfield, shall be developed. It has to develop because the giant size ships are getting built. For the giant size ships, the port infrastructure should develop. The shipping channels, the safe navigation channel for approach to the port should be developed. Dredging should be the dredging method should change. The dredging quantum will increase. Thereby, the cost of moving a cargo from one point to the other point of the continent, or to one continent to the other continent, or one region to the other region, the cost will also decrease. And the new business model is the last mile connectivity, and thereby that's why the multimodal transportation is introduced. And in many developed countries, the multimodal transportation works well, but in developing countries and many more other countries, the multimodal transportation do not work well. Because it doesn't work well, the cost of the cargo increases, and because the cost of cargo increases, all the associated other cargo prices also increases, and thereby it affects the industry cycle per se. So in India and across the globe, the last mile connectivity is going to be the new business model, and therefore, in my opinion, and as to conclude, the maritime trade or the maritime industry is will develop, and it's on the greener side. It will not have a negative impact of whatsoever we call it or whatsoever we name it, and there the industry will develop and the trade will also develop in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session, and it was a great learning for us. With the permission of yours, sir, can we move forward with the Q&A part, which is question and answers part?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I would like to move forward with the question of Dr. Suresh R, which is how India is poised to handle the greater challenges posed by China's jugular in Indian Ocean region, due to China's superiority in maritime defense and trade, which is said to be far more resourceful and robust in terms of its overall control. What will be India's future strategies to tackle it?
Yeah, it's a lengthy question, but to make it short, Dr. Suresh, I think we will overcome all these hurdles, and the strategies I may not be able to enumerate or tell you what the strategies are going to be, because the strategies have to be coherent with the government policies. The strategies has to be coherent with the shipping policies at the highest level, which will percolate down to the shipping industry. So I do not know what are the strategies. I leave that wisdom to the policymakers at the government level. But at our level for discussion, we have to look at certain strategies which has to be robust, like I indicated in my earlier slide. Yeah, we have the strategic infrastructure investments, the distribution strategy, and the increased collaborations. what is happening now between the Indian ports or one port or the other port, they all compete. They don't complement each other. Unlike Sri Lanka, or unlike China, or unlike Australia, they don't complement each other, but they compete. And for this competing, for competing between each ports, there will be certain drawbacks, and that drawback has to be dealt with, and therefore the collaboration need to be encouraged between the shipping liners, the ports, and other stakeholders. And the infrastructure development should obviously take place. We are still working with infrastructure which was built in 1960s and 1970s. Whereas if you look at Colombo, they are operating at 21 to 24 meters depth. Whereas in India, on an average, we are only operating at minus 12 meters depth of the channel. So therefore, the infrastructure development is mandatory, either brownfield or the greenfield or the brownfield. So once the infrastructure is developed, and I am sure we can compete with China.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And the next question is from Archie D'Souza ma'am, which is why are inland waterways and coastal shipping so neglected in India?
Yeah, Professor Archie D'Souza is a professor and he's a man, Ganesh.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that's an interesting question by Professor D'Souza. Why it is neglected? That's an interesting question. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to answer your question, Professor. 1980s, the government of India declared 5 waterways: NW 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And today we are in 2021. It's about 52 years. And still this 5 national waterways were not developed. And if you look at the other side of the coin, all these national waterways were used long time, not many centuries ago, few decades ago, maybe 1960s and 1970s. These waterways were used from Calcutta to Allahabad. NW1 was used, Brahmaputra NW2 was used, NW3 was used, and 4 from Kakinada to Pondicherry was used. But it's very unfortunate we were not able to sustain and develop this national waterways for various reasons. I can tell you one of the main reasons is we have a concurrent list, we have a state list, and we have a central list. And some of the waterways falls under the central list, some of the waterways falls under the state list, and some of the waterways falls under the concurrent list. And that's why the National Waterways Act in 2016, whereby they declared 111 national waterways as national waterways, because they found there is a big gap in developing the national waterways, because a part falls under the national list, and a part of the same river, let's say NW1, let's say 50 kilometer stretch falls with the national list, whereas the next 100 kilometers falls with the state list. So both cannot coherently work. For that reason, we were unable to maintain our national waterways. And coastal shipping, there was no necessity to have a coastal shipping because we did not have hub ports. And the hub ports concept has come only very recently, about a decade back. And now the coastal shipping is getting developed, and there is more importance given for the coastal shipping and the inland waterways because of the national, because of converting the waterways into the national waterways through a National Waterways Act 2016. And of the new business model of the last mile connectivity to be very competitive, so that the Indian ship owners will also be very competitive in carrying their cargo when compared with their foreign counterparts.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So before going to the next question, I would like to request the participants to download their certificates from the link provided in the chat box. So this link will be open until 8:30 p.m. Okay. So the next question is from Professor Niaz Ahmed. So what is the new method will be introduced to reduce the transit time of shipment from one port to other port?
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
What is the new method will be introduced to reduce the transit time of shipment from one port to other port?
The ship sailing from point A to point B. Let's say we have a 10,000 or 20,000 or a 30,000 kilowatt engine, and your speed depends on the engine. Thereby, we cannot have any control on the engine. If the engine works at 80 MCR or at 90 MCR, then it might give you 16 knots speed, and depending upon your current, depending upon your winds, your speed might increase or decrease, which the captain or the chief engineer do not have any control. But what is within the control of the shipping liner, or what is within the control of the port authority, is the turnaround time at the port and the waiting time at your anchorage. If the waiting time and the turnaround time is reduced, then your transit time will also get reduced. When I call the transit time, I'm considering the transit time from let's say Visakhapatnam port to Cochin port. So I consider the whole cycle, the time the vessel leaves Visakhapatnam and the time the vessel berths at Cochin port as a transit time. So I'm not going to differentiate between only the sailing from a fairway buoy to fairway buoy is a transit time, which we don't have any control on that. What is within the control is whenever the ship arrives at the anchorage, we quickly take the vessel inside to the berth, complete our loading and unloading, and quickly sail her out. So if this time is reduced, the turnaround time will get reduced, and also the transit time will get reduced.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, with your permission, that if you look at statistics, turnaround time at Singapore is half that of India. So
Yeah.
if Singapore is 1 day, then India is 2 days. Exactly what Dr. Victor was talking about. So you can't control, Niaz, you can't control too much ship speeds between 2 points, but you can definitely take a good shot at managing turnaround time at ports where Indian ports are, sad to say, not very efficient.
Okay, sir. So the last question is from our Dean, sir. The question is, in terms of maritime capabilities, India is consistently being outperformed by many of its Asian neighbors. According to the 2016 World Bank's Global Performance Index, India ranked at 35 out of 160 countries. What should we do to improve?
No, we have to improve our infrastructure facilities. We have to improve the turnaround time of the ships calling on the ports, and we have to improve the efficiency, the loading and unloading efficiency, and we have to improve to have zero accidents or zero downtime, which will certainly increase the efficiency of the ports and take us to take us the closer number than 35 or 36. I hope it satisfies you, Captain Nagaraj.
Okay, sir.
Was that my question?
Yes, sir. It was yours.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So by this, it's the end of Q&A part, sir. So thank you for your interaction with us.
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victor. It's been a pleasure meeting you. And like I said earlier, when you are in Bengaluru next, please do visit the university and meet physically our wonderful MBA and executive MBA students.
I will certainly make it a point. I'll certainly.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's over to you, Meda. Carry forward.
Yes. Thank you, Ganesh. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Anand Sagar University and Distinguished Speakers Series Committee, it's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on this very occasion. We have been fortunate to have an eminent speaker today, Dr. Victor, who not only spared his invaluable time for us to grace this occasion, but also enlightened us with his commendable talk on the subject. So it gave us the deeper insights into the topic and also revealed some interesting facts. So indeed, it was really a great effort from Sir to make this event unforgettable. I would like to thank our Dean, Professor Captain Nagaraj Subbarao sir, for giving us this opportunity to organize this webinar. I would also extend my generous thanks to all the faculties of the Anand Sagar University. I'm very thankful to the participants for accepting our invitation and attending this session. Well, an event like this cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling weeks ago. It requires planning and an eagle's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of wonderful teaching faculties, along with very motivated and dedicated members of DSS committee who know their job and are result-oriented. It takes this occurrence to express my gratitude to them as well. Once again, thank you, sir, for this wonderful session. It has remained a pronounced pleasure. With this, I would like to conclude my vote of thanks. But before we end the session, I have an exciting announcement to make. We all know how difficult the time is, and also we see people working nowadays from home. So it is something that makes us to curiously wonder how are the organizations functioning right now. So we have one more session that will be held on 27th of May, which will be carried out by Mr. Hitendra Bhargav, CEO and Regional Management Board Member, Asia Pacific Clubber, Lubrication India Private Limited. He would be talking on the challenges of leading an organization during pandemic. So it will be really an interesting session to understand how exactly the organizations are functioning in this tough time. So thank you very much, and have a great day ahead, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.